segregate, mediate, alleviate, try not to hate, love your mate, don't suffocate on your own hate, designate your lover's fate, a one world state as human freight, the number 8, a white black state, a gentle train, a broken crane, a heavy weight, just too late, now death is state, appreciate, depreciate, fabricate, emulate, truth dilate, a special day, the animals made, guilt debate, the insurrate, a better rate, a youth irate to liberate, fascinate, deviate, and reinstate, liberate, to liberate, liberate.
Hi, I'm Jed Clampett, and you're watching Fayetteville Public Access Television.
Death, it well and truly sucks. But if you're lucky, you get a good obituary to see you out. And with us today is Shannon X. Caine, known in some quarters as the Death Lady.
That's right.
Now, how did you come to get such a cool moniker, the Death Lady?
Well, ever since I was young, I had a fascination with cemeteries and obituaries, and I began collecting obituaries. And I got a reputation for being interested in obits. If people had, you know, in a lot of houses, people will clip the obits, put them in shoe boxes, or cram them in the back of a family Bible or something, and people found out that I was interested in that. And all, you know, over time, I just became the Death Lady. I'm the one who's interested in that kind of data. And when I do public speaking engagements or whatever, people may forget my name, but they remember the Death Lady.
A lot of times when people read obituaries, it's just a sort of dry recitation of facts. So-and-so was a Presbyterian, they rode a tractor, they were married to so-and-so, they had 6 grandchildren, and they were born in Texas, you know?
Yep.
Or if they were really unlucky, they were born in Oklahoma. But I mean, it's hard to imagine people collecting that sort of boring recitation of facts, that sort of obituary.
Mm-hmm. Well, I do. I have obits that are as sparse as one sentence in length. I'll take whatever information that I can. I try to make sure that it has some genealogical use.
Yeah.
And you know, it can be surprising, especially if you happen upon a report from an old newspaper of a death. You record it and you find out that that's one of the unmarked burials. Then you've preserved somebody's name, and to me, you know, that's important. So yeah, some of them are dry, some of them are very lively.
Really?
Yeah.
Are they older obituaries that are more lively, or?
I have some that are virtually unprintable because, you know, people crack me up when they talk about the good old days, and they haven't read as many old newspapers as I have read,
Right,
and the
yeah.
things that people die from, and you know, and people, it seemed almost took glee in printing, you know, a death notice if it was scandalous or vulgar or disgusting.
Yeah.
And so you can, I mean, there are people that are still probably, you know, shuddering, you know, 6 feet under at what went in the newspaper about them. So yeah, you know, some of those can be really interesting, and lots and lots of murder and suicide, and all manner of racial and regional hostilities and things, and then you have the the things we don't think of in this day and age as cause of death. You wouldn't believe how many obits I got from people who died of worms. And
Worms?
Worms, parasites, and
Good old days.
intestinal parasites,
Yeah.
the good old days. And people were dropping like flies from, you know, the common cold and just all kinds of things. And so, if anything, it points out, you know, how much better the standard of living is. Also, you would be shocked to know how many children died wandering into the open hearth fires.
Really?
And yeah, the moms would go out to milk the cow or whatever, come back, and the kids burned to death. And they would boil huge cauldrons of water for washing the laundry and so forth. Toddlers would fall into the boiling water and scald themselves to death. And I come upon stuff like that just again and again. Just horrible ways that young children died.
That's pretty horrible.
It is
That's pretty-
horrible.
you think-
Yeah, that's the unfun part of
Yeah.
being the death lady.
Do you think obituaries were really interesting for a while, and then for a time they became just dry and boring, and then now do you think they're more interesting because
I
people
think,
are
yeah,
paying
I
for
think
obituaries?
there's definitely been a, you know, you can almost see fashions in obituaries like anything else. One thing that interests me is the different, what's important from state to state. In some regions, it's very important if the person went to a certain type of Christian church to say when they had their confirmation.
Yeah.
And in other areas, that's completely irrelevant.
Yeah.
But in some areas, that's a very important thing to people.
Right.
And there are, I recently got a handful of Native American obits from a specific tribe. It's very important what clan of the tribe that you belong to. And so what is important from region to region changes and is interesting to note. And also, yeah, in newspapers, say from the 1800s, they might be a little more florid and tell you things. Now, one thing they're bad about not saying in old newspapers is where the person was buried.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and they'll tell you all about the rites and who sang and this and that, and they won't tell you where they buried the person, which...
That can be frustrating, especially for a family member.
Yeah, and so sometimes I'll, you know, and there's a lot of them like that. You'll find, and they won't say what cemetery they went into,
Yeah.
and it puts you right at a dead end, you know, for any kind of serious genealogical research. But yeah, you had those florid obits, and then it moved, maybe around, you certainly see it by the 1940s and stuff. It starts becoming just the facts, ma'am, just very
Right.
condensed.
Kind of Joe Friday obituaries.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah.
And then circa the 90s, they start getting a little more interesting again, with the, especially with the paid obits. And you start getting more of a sense of the actual person, what they were into, club affiliations and different things.
The paid obituaries are kind of like your last hurrah.
That's right. And, you know, if you want, you know, more than just the facts,
Right.
you know, you'll want a paid obituary, and that's how it's handled now. Almost all of your longer ones you'll find are paid.
Do you think there's a lot to be said for having a hand in writing your own obituary?
Sure, I'm considering, and you know, people may be amazed I haven't written mine yet, but I keep thinking, well, I keep changing things in my life. I change,
Yeah.
you know.
It's like your resume.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know, my club affiliation, you know, what I do for a living, or just different things. You know, it does change, and circumstance changes, and so I haven't sat down and written my own, but yeah, I'd like to, and especially with my own background, because of multiple adoptions. I'm probably the only my husband and I are probably the only people who could tell you who I came from, and you know, but who, you know, the people that whose genetics helped bring me here are not the people who raised me, and so I would be the one who could say that.
Would that be the true irony? If you got hit by a truck today, and you're the, I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
the obituary lady is the one person who hasn't got an obituary written?
Yeah, yeah, and I definitely have been thinking it's time, and my husband, I think, wants to write his own too. And every now and then I will come upon obits written by the deceased. Usually it's people that had terminal diseases. They knew they were
Yeah.
going to pass. And, you know, and I found a number of them. And one just recently, and the man was like, he just said, you know, if you're reading this, I'm dead. And here's what my life was like, and here's what was important to me. And it's actually pretty moving.
I guess even if you don't write your own, the important thing is, I guess, to have somebody write it who actually liked you.
That would
You don't want to
be
be pawned off on a family member who really didn't like you very much. You know?
Well, a few times I have found, usually in online, with funeral homes that have an online presence, they have guest books. And you always try to write something nice in the guest book, even if it's kind of bland, maybe somebody you didn't know real well, but you know, I'm so sorry to hear, about Mr. Smith's passing or whatever. But I've come upon a couple entries in those from people who really didn't like the deceased, and it's pretty entertaining. It's horrifying, and it's entertaining. And I read a rather long tribute in someone's guest book and talked about him being, a scummy landlord, and it was. And I was surprised the funeral home let it sit, but last time I looked, it was still there.
I've seen books, actually. They sell books now on how to write your own obituary.
Wow. Okay. And I sell books that have obituaries in them, but I don't tell you how to write your own. Although one branch, as Obit City grows as a website, is I am willing to offer my services to funeral homes. I have written thousands and thousands of obits. I've edited so many.
Yeah.
And sometimes I just get raw data, and I have to turn that into a nice-looking, concise, compact obit. And I'm glad to do that commercially. And so, you would be surprised how many funeral homes just really need help. Whoever is typing in the obits, no sense of syntax or grammar.
So who usually does the obituary?
A lot of times, well, it depends. A lot of times you'll get pawned off on the receptionists or the front desk people at any given funeral home. Now, if it's in the paper, there's usually, a lot of times they're faxed in or emailed, and they'll just come in on the fax every so often, and they'll get sent by the funeral homes. And then the newspaper editors, the copy editors, they kind of rewrite the information that they get from the funeral home.
Sometimes, there are obituaries missing in a paper. People who die in police custody, oftentimes their obituaries don't end up in the paper. I've noticed that in the last couple of years.
I know somebody who passed away under some strange circumstances, and no, his obit never made the paper. And so there's definitely cases, which is partially, why it's important, especially to go back for older ones. And one thing that I do is in areas that were segregated before the Civil Rights Movement, they divide the obits, and you'll get a little corner, and it says burials of Negroes or something.
Really?
Yeah, and I'll take that, and if it says where they're buried, a lot of times I will put that on the site, so that if somebody is looking for this person, and I've found a lot that it turns out were in unmarked graves in those cemeteries, and I found those people. And so to me, one of the highlights of my day is to turn up an unmarked burial, and so people know this person lived, they're out there. They're not marked, but they're out there. I
guess obituaries are a good way, really an interesting way, other than newspaper articles, to look at a society's mores.
I would say so.
Yeah.
And you see what's important to the people. I have read, speak again of the racial segregation. I've read horrifying obits. And, I'm not joking about how awful some of these are. And where they'll refer to this deceased simply as a good darky or you know, something like that.
Yeah.
I've read a lot of obits on Native Americans that were just crass, you know, and so especially when I see something like that, if it says where the person was laid to rest, I really try to get that and
Yeah.
write it in a dignified way. And a lot of times, sometimes I'll put the cause of death. Most of the time I don't.
Right.
But if the person died in an embarrassing way, a
Yeah.
lot of times I won't put that. I usually don't put if the person committed suicide, and you'd be surprised how many of mine did. And you know, again, the good old days, suicide was rampant, absolutely rampant. And so a lot of times I won't necessarily say suicide, although somebody wrote me about one and said it's okay to say that they committed suicide.
Okay.
And so if the family says it's okay to say that, or if they, you know, just passed of any strange circumstances, if the family contacts me and says
Right.
it's okay to say that, then I'll put it in there.
What can you tell us about, you have the website Obit City.
That's right.
And what exactly will people find when they go there?
When you go to Obit City, not surprisingly, you'll find obits.
Right.
Tons, thousands. You know, I mean, lots and lots of obits. I should, I guess, go into how it got started, but it was a little free website I took out. I had some Arkansas obits, and I thought, you know, somebody might be interested in these, and I'll put them online for everyone to see.
Yeah.
And I did. And it grew, and soon I had over 1,000, and it kept growing and growing. And I was getting so much email about it. I said, well, people are interested in obits, you know,
Right.
who knew? And so I added 2 states. I added Louisiana and Mississippi.
Right.
Then I added Alabama. And now Obit City is in the process of going to all 50 states. I have 39 states completed, working on number 40.
And you have people from around the world too, don't you? Other countries.
Yeah,
contacting
and
you.
now I'm not running international obits. That's something I'm still thinking about. I'm trying to slog my way through America right
Yeah.
now. But yeah, people from other countries write me, and they'll say, you know, I got a nice letter from someone in Canada, and so they said, thank you, you found my relatives, the friends of our family went to America, and we never knew what became of them. And now we see that they're buried in Searcy County, Arkansas. You know.
So how many emails do you usually get on your
Oh my
site?
God, lots. On a slow day, maybe I'll get a dozen, but a lot of times, you know, the first page, I wake up and the first page of the inbox is just crammed, you know, and it slows down a little on holidays and weekends.
So people even contact you on holidays?
Oh yeah, yeah, and a lot of times they can give me extra information, or they'll send me an obit. And I had a guy who found one of the obits, and he said, could you please put on the obit, and he said, this was my mother, and said, could you please say that she didn't live there where she, where you have her recorded.
Yeah.
She was trying to escape Hurricane Katrina, but she was in her 90s, and she's actually from New Orleans. But they, in all the shuffle, she got into Mississippi somehow and passed away. And he just said, you know, he asked if I could say that she was a New Orleans native. I said, I'd be happy to, you know. And so, you know, sometimes it's corrections, and family members contact me.
So you try to answer all the emails, or as many as you can?
I answer most, yeah. And every now and then people send me an email that's just so surreal that I can't decipher it. It's like I'm not sure what they're asking, or they send me their whole family history, and I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do with it.
Right.
You know, and I'm a little bit baffled, or amazingly, given the scope and size of that site, people will say, oh, you have my relative, you must be a cousin, how are you related to me? And it's like, I'm not related to all these people, you know, how could I be? And I think people kind of aren't they're just not thinking, you know, and they're like, oh, long lost relative. It's like, are you kidding me? You know? And so I think that's kind of, you know, funny or weird, you know, when people think that just because I added an obit that I'm related. Now I do have obits for some of my step relatives. If somebody ever contacts me about that, I'm glad to tell them, you know, what I know, and I'd love to hear from them. And but interesting thing about the contact, I put in the obit for my mother-in-law.
Right.
And she passed before I ever met her,
Yeah.
you know, and she passed when my husband was 13. Well, anyway, I put that on the site. I got an email about it, and they said, are you related to Zerelda? And I said, she would have been my mother-in-law, yes. And they said, well, we're related, and all this stuff. And it ended up with my husband getting to meet his he met one of his half-sisters, and they had been taken away and adopted out when he was still a little kid. And because of that one obit, he got to meet family he didn't even, you know, really know anything about. So I thought that was just kind of the ultimate cool, you know, side of doing that.
So how many obituaries do you think you've written so far?
It's in the thousands. I honestly don't know. I don't have the patience to sit and count them all. And I know there's a gazillion for Arkansas alone. Arkansas is my biggest database.
Yeah.
Louisiana and Mississippi would be next. I am about to get, you know, when they get big enough, I'll divide it alphabetically. I'll put A through F, G through L. And I'll divide them if it just starts getting too big. I think the next state that'll probably go that way is Oklahoma.
Yeah.
So I recently got a bunch of Oklahoma obits. Illinois is kind of growing.
Now you do public speaking about your obituary. Now, what's it like? What do you do when you go public speaking? I mean, what sort of group?
And talk to civic groups.
Yeah.
You know, anybody, I recently talked to the Kiwanis Club, for example. Anybody who's just curious about why some nut would spend her time collecting obits. And I talk about it in terms of why this is important.
Yeah.
And like I showed, I had some little death cards that were issued at Roman Catholic funerals, and they have the picture of the deceased, maybe a prayer, and where they were born and died. A lot of these people were born in Germany. And I took that, I took a card commemorating a dead Nazi soldier, and sometimes when a man would fall in battle, the German government would issue little cards to send to the family. Right. And so I have things like that, and I'll just circulate them among the people, and so, you know, and point out, okay, even though this person was a Nazi, you know, he had family who cared. Right. And there's people that were concerned about his death, and I'm concerned too, you know. I think it's important to preserve this information. And so, you know, I talk about why I do this, and a lot of it is just a labor of love, and possibly one of the world's stranger hobbies, but I also do cemetery transcriptions.
I don't know, because, I mean, you've read a lot of obituaries.
I've read a
So
ton.
you've probably come across stranger hobbies.
Well, yeah, I have, because a lot of people will list their hobbies, and I kid you not, I had somebody whose hobby was drinking Coca-Cola. And they just...
That's a good hobby.
They just liked Coke.
I wonder what they died of.
Yeah, and excessive carbonation. And so, yeah, I'd have, you know, I had this obit for somebody that just thought Coca-Cola had a Jim Dandy product, and this was like a major part of the obit. She really liked to drink Coke. You know, I'm like cool with that, you know, and whatever, you know, gets a person through their day. And people who collect pencils, you know, wanted to have a pencil from every nation in the world. You know, hey, everybody's got a goal, you know, and just peculiar
I'm just feeling
things.
so much better about my hobbies,
Oh yeah.
about things I collect.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's I can't even go into it. Th- uh, there was an elderly man who collected and played with dolls, and they talked. That was his passion. He liked his dollies, you know.
You know, I think dollhouses are kind of cool. The
Doll
big
houses
doll
are cool.
houses are kind of cool.
Oh yeah, and
I don't know where that came from, but I just threw that out there.
yeah, just thought. Well, you said that, and it just reminded me of one of my grandfathers before his passing. Really got into stuffed animals. He built like a little train track and
Really?
put his teddy bears in
Yeah.
into the train and rode them around and just thought that was coolest, and so it's, to me, part of the fascination with an obit is to see what clubs the people belong to and what they collect. And sometimes it can be dull, but sometimes it kind of gives you a general picture of the individual. And some of the things that people build club affiliations around is kind of because especially with the advent of the internet, if you have a weird hobby, chances are good you're going to find at least one other soul.
That's true.
Who really gets turned on by collecting bread wrappers.
Oh, you know it.
So
there's a whole,
somebody's
there's
gonna.
a whole Facebook group probably around
Oh yeah,
it,
and so that from there they form a club, and
Yeah.
so the deceased belong to the American Federation of Bread Wrapper Collectors or something, and so to me that's just quirky and interesting. But I have obits for people that were just interested in all manner of things. Maybe they're into rocketry or
I really do like a lot of the paid obituaries, because you really do, I think, get a really interesting look at a person. A lot of them are really well written. You sort of wish that you'd met this person.
I find that true with almost all of my obits, and I have an obit that's only, like I said, sometimes I only have one sentence's worth of information. So-and-so died on such and such a date. He was born so-and-so. He's buried at the thus and thus cemetery. And that's all I know. And I always want to find out more about those people, and sometimes I do. And when I do, I get thrilled. Now, I've got a situation like that right now with an Oklahoma obituary, and that's all I had, one sentence. And as I do more research, I believe the guy was a tribal chief.
Really?
And so, if I determine that the chief that I'm reading about and all the things that he did, if that's really that person that matches my obit and the name's unusual enough, it's probably so, then I want to say, hey, here's somebody who, did some big stuff, And so, it's interesting to me when I find out.
I saw a nice obituary this week in the paper. A woman's son had died, and she wrote a note to her son in the obituary and talked about how he was no longer in pain. That was a really nice touch in the obituary.
Yeah, every now and then you'll find, very personal things like that, and or just reminiscences from family members, and it's, that personal touch is kind of what makes an obit worthwhile. And this is kind of a spin-off of, my husband had wanted to do a project for a long time, just collecting stories from people, and just, we were those kinds of kids who didn't complain when Grandpa told us the same story twice. We wanted to hear the old war stories and the, what it was like back then. I know my great-grandmother was an amazing source of information, and she lived from, horse and buggy to the space race. Changes in her life, how things were different, and I wanted to know that. I wanted to hear more, and from his desire to do that, I started thinking about, well, there's also obituaries, that tells you a whole lot, and it's interesting to me. Just like I said, the styles of the obits change. And there's kind of a. I was talking to somebody recently about obituary names. There are certain names that some people call obituary names. You see that name and you think this is probably Mildred,
Yeah.
you know, names like this, and you see, oh, an obituary name, you know, they're coming of that generation.
That's right, and you can tell, like in a lot of names, in 20 or 30 years, you'll be able to see a lot of names like Storm and Raven. You say, oh, these were names inspired by soap operas.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and if you hand me a random stack of obits and I'm not looking at the age, I can make a certain deduction, you know, if the person is named Orville versus if the person is named Caine
Yeah.
or something, you know, it's like, oh, okay. And every now and then I'm wrong, you
Yeah.
know, but not often.
Right.
And I was fooled by one just the other day. The person's name was Crystal, and I thought younger person.
Yeah.
No, she lived to be almost 100.
Really?
And, yeah.
Wow.
And so every now and then, you know, an obit, and you know, and the name's Walter. You say, okay, probably a you know, middle-aged to older gentleman.
Right.
No, he's 6 years old. You know,
Wow.
and so you know, it sometimes you get fooled by it.
Yeah. People keep naming their kids after their grandparents.
Yeah,
And
and
they get saddled with these awful names.
and I actually, you know, as far as preference, I actually prefer the older names. I think to
Yeah.
some of the names, some of these poor children, and you know, it makes me want to open up some kind of charitable foundation
Well,
for
thank
them.
God they can change their names when they get older.
Yeah, yeah, but they'll fit in. They'll have other, you know, people of their age group with that name, and
Or they can join a group on Facebook, the Dorky Name.
the dorky
Group, yeah.
name, the Bizarro Name Club,
Yeah.
you know. And speaking of names, I've been wanting to make it more plain on the obitcity.com website. Now it's kind of in the bowels of the, you have to kind of look through the site to find it.
Right.
I actually have a jumping off link to my other website. I have a number of other websites, but
Right.
I have one of unusual names, names
Really?
that I collected out of
Okay.
obits. And names that you just would not believe. And some of them are pretty and some of them are bizarre, but names that you just don't hear as much anymore. And I have found death records for people by the first name of Lucifer, and so I put it in there. And surprisingly enough, it was a certain time frame in the 1800s.
Yeah.
And there were a few people, tend to be out in the hill areas, you know, pioneer settlers, and every now and then you'll find a kid named Lucifer, you know, and
Must have been really difficult childbirth.
yeah, and I recently found a death record on somebody whose first name was Appliance, and you know, Frutessa, just these names that you might not hear every day, and so. You know, I actually just kind of alphabetized them. I didn't even break them up into male or female. I just unloaded them, you know, on the web, and I've gotten some emails about
Wow.
it from people who said, "Oh, thank you for putting that. We're thinking of naming our baby this," you know.
Wow.
And it's like, you know, glad to help.
What's Lucifer?
Yeah, and all my best to little Zephaniah.
Yeah.
And so if I find a name that just strikes me as really unusual, sometimes I'll try to go, you know, put
Right.
it over there.
So what's next?
Well, what's next is finishing Obit City.
Yeah.
If you go there today, it's in progress. Like I said, I want to have obits from all 50 states.
Right.
Each time I get a state, if I get 20 obits for any given state, I'll open up a database on it.
Okay.
And that's not where I stop. That's just what it takes for me to open it.
Right.
And then I put it plainly on the site, you know, if you think this is too few, you know, don't worry, they grow. And obits, like rabbits, just multiply.
That's true. There'll
And
never be a shortage of them, will there?
there's never a shortage, and that's one of the, you know, sometimes that thought is actually overwhelming to me because I can only do so many.
Yeah.
And then it's like, think of all the people that I just don't have the time to put on. There's new ones coming in every day. There is no end to it.
Yeah.
And you would think, you know, okay, yeah, that's an obvious point, but sometimes in the middle of the night you're sitting there just thinking the staggering number of the dead, and it borders on the creepy. And, you know, you can never get them all, you know. There's no way you could even get all of them for a year, you know. There's just so many in every city, in every state, not to mention, you know, your the stuff going on in foreign countries.
So if you ever have like a near-death experience, you know, you're heading toward that tunnel and there's going to be dead people going, no, my obituary is not finished yet.
And you know, it's just so interesting, though. I think, you know, anything I can know about a person,
Right.
and maybe it's just because I'm nosy, but I do feel sometimes like I knew these people, or oh, I wish I knew more about so and so.
Yeah.
You know, and maybe their name strikes me as interesting. And what was this person like? And I get so curious. But I have, as of right now, got 39 states open.
That's very cool. And you're working on the 40th.
Shooting for 50. I'm working on Minnesota right now. And so, and meanwhile, obits for other states keep coming in. And so I may put down 5 or 10 Minnesota obits, but then I have, you know, another 10 sitting there for Arkansas and a few for Indiana, and there's some for Rhode Island. And so it's just kind of like a constant thing.
How long does it take to write an obituary?
Not long for me. I can,
Yeah.
of course, I'm mostly editing. I'm mostly
Right.
editing pre-printed obits, so not always, but sometimes I write the actual obit.
Right.
I don't know, 2 minutes or less.
Okay.
And depending on how big, you
Right.
know, we have the ones we call the Pope obits. You
Yeah.
know, they're humongous.
Right.
It's like, those are harder to
You see
pare
those in
down.
the paper now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And those are your paid obituaries. And, you know, sometimes, like I said, I just have so little information. And sometimes, especially older ones for little children.
Right.
I got in an obit, I just put it on for Oklahoma, a group of triplets. They were born on different days, which makes me think they're born, I'm guessing they're born around midnight.
Yeah.
One came first and the other two came, you know, it's reported as the next day, but, you know, same session. And
Yeah.
so, but they passed on the same day.
Right.
And I put everything that I knew about them, which wasn't a lot, but, you know, you're left always wondering about things like that, you know.
Yeah. Well, Shannon, I want to appreciate you. Yeah, that was very good. I appreciate you for coming on the show today.
Well, thanks so much.
And we'll have to do this again sometime.
All right.
And now we're going to run the end credits, which is kind of like the obituary for this show.
All right.
All right.
Let's do it.
Thank you all for watching. Death. It really sucks. But let me try that opener again. My opener really sucked.
Hi, I'm Jed Clampett, and you're watching Fayetteville Public Access Television.
Hallucinate to segregate, mediate, alleviate, try not to hate, love your mate, don't suffocate on your hate, designate your lover's fate, one world state as human freight, the number 8, A white black slate, a gentle train, the broken crane, a heavy weight, just too late. Now death is stayed. Appreciate, depreciate, fabricate, emulate, truth dilate, a special day. The animals we ate, guilt to babe, the inserate, a better rate, a youth irate to liberate, fascinate, enthusiate, and reinstate, liberate, to liberate, liberate.
I was Steve's den mother for 3 years.
He was one of my more active scouts.
Always scrambling around the meetings, diving over furniture, under furniture, never stopped moving.
All the kids chasing him.
Running, running, running,
He
running.
didn't pick up anything he didn't try and throw. Still, he was a leader, had a lot of character.
I always knew Steve was going to amount to something as soon as he learned to sit still.
Thought about it over and over for a very long time. Rested on a lot of shoulders and kept you on my mind. Distant feelings from deep within me move themselves close to you. Feeling all that's within me and never knowing just what to do. And can you feel it deep within you? Have you come to realize all this feeling deep within me? Can you see it in my eyes? And grasping the differences, we know we're not the same. Each have our separate ways, and no one's there to blame. Finding the memories, removing all the stains. There's a love that's growing to remain, and can you feel it deep within you? Have you come? All this feeling deep within me, can you see it in my eyes? Can you see it in my eyes? Can you see it, see it, see it, see it, see it?
Two, three, four. Well, I left home as a young man, traveled down on 59, caught a ride on I-40 and I rode it on down the line. slept on the beach at Malibu, traveled south to Mexico. Ended up stuck in Seattle where the rainfall meets the snow. But I'm still a free man. Yes, I'm still a free man on the road to understand. Yeah. But the rambling spirit hit me and the road became my way. It set loose the ties that bind me and the rules that guide my day. So here I sit, open book, my lady by my side. Take a dip and have another sip, just enjoy the ride, yeah. Well, I'm still a free man. Yes, I'm still a free man on the road to understand. So I spent some time with Uncle Sam, thought I'd ride the waves. Culture shock, watching the clock seemed to make up most of my days. Caught a ride back home to Arkansas, settled in a college town. Education gave me questions and 2 words, upward bound. But I'm still a free man. Yes, I'm still a free man on the road to understand. Now I'm writing poetry at a ripe old age, it seems. Mother Earth has finally spoken, filling in the color of my dreams. So here I sit, an open book, my lady by my side. So take a tip and have another sip, just enjoy the ride. I'm still a free man. Thank you.
Have any of you ever had this experience where you go out on a first date with somebody and it is hot? You know, everything clicks, you feel great, you have everything in common. You talk and talk and talk and talk and talk for hours, fiery chemistry. It's just swell. And then you go out on another date and it's just as good. And then you move in together. And you wait the second date. Well, that's at the end of the second date. Okay, and then you know, then you buy a house together, a car together, you buy some CDs together, start sharing socks, and then in about 6... My partner won't share socks. Her partner's a little compulsive, okay? Anyway, then about 6 months down the road, you realize that that other person is just sick. You know, has raunchy habits, textbook personality disorders, character flaws, in fact, has BPS, which is a new diagnosis, that's bad personality syndrome. Well, of course, the other person's probably sitting there thinking about the same thing about you, but this song is about that very important process of discovery. And wondered if we'd ever have enough to pay. At that time you had a job and you were making lots of money, I was doing well myself, I never thought that I would ever see the day that life would be such bliss. And then you bought an Eldorado, and you said it was for me, but then you wouldn't let me drive it anywhere because I couldn't even reach the gas. You know, you could have warned me, it could have been discussed. At least you could have left my car keys. Now I ride the bus 15 miles speakers. And by the way, I cannot wait until I find you. I have a few things to say. That promotion that you wanted, your boss gave away to me. Say, lovey.
Special at the Cosmic Kitchen Cafe. I saw this great plate. I asked what it was. Special of the day. I said I wanted one of those, but when it came, it wasn't quite the same. The spuds were mashed, not fried. The fish was broiled, and it still had its eye on me, it seemed. I flipped it over, a bit more blurry orb this time. Still the same tight gaze. I called the waitress, tried to send it back, but no way. My neighbor said he didn't like what he got. Well, we tried to trade. The plates stuck to their places. We stood up, tried to change our luck by switching seats. It didn't do a bit of good. Our food just followed us. We tried to feed each other what we had, but every bite of fish he got dripped grease, and mine grew eyes along its sides. We had to stop. We asked to see the cook. He took off his apron smeared with blood and stood by us. He laughed. He said, of course we didn't like what we were served. He said folks always got what they deserved, and when we ate it up, we'd get our just desserts.
segregate, mediate, alleviate, try not to hate, love your mate, don't suffocate on your hate, designate your lover's fate, one world state as human freight, the number 8, a white black slate, a gentle train, the broken crane, a heavy weight, just too late, now death is state, appreciate, depreciate, fabricate, emulate, truth dilate, a special day, the animals we hate, guilt debate, the inserate, a better rate, a youth irate to liberate, fascinate, deviate, and reinstate, liberate, to liberate, liberate.
Politics in general and jobs that don't pay enough, 40-hour work weeks, books full of boring stuff, schools that should teach but kids don't learn a thing. These are a few of my least favorite things. Healthcare that won't heal and how people treat the earth, paying tolls and taxes, disbelief in self-worth, bitter cold winters that cut into spring. These are a few of my least favorite things. Religions that claim they're true, don't get me started. Standards that double and people cold-hearted. Judgment and bias when freedom don't ring. These are a few of my least favorite things. All the lying, all the killing. When I'm depressed and sad, I add that to all of my least favorite things, and then I feel really bad. I feel like Julie Andrews or something.